Now let's head to the story that's making news since yesterday. Attorney General Godfred Dame says he will task the Criminal Investigations Department of the Ghana Police Service to investigate former NDC government ministers and officials for their role in a $170 million Ghana Power Generation Company judgment debt. His comments come after the NDC minority in Parliament accused government of causing financial loss to the state in the matter. In 2018, Ghana terminated a contract for a fast-track power generation solution involving the relocation of 2 aero-derivative gas turbine power plants to Ghana by the company. The deal was signed by the Mahama-led government sometime in 2015. The Attorney General says those involved will be punished. Now, before we hear from him, let me give you more details about the agreement and how it got terminated, resulting in that judgment debt. Head of JoyNews Research Desk, Raymond Akwa, joins me with more. So Raymond, take us to the genesis of this agreement.
So you mentioned the 2015 negotiations. So exactly on June 3, we signed the agreement. It's what we call the emergency purchase agreement. And the idea was that they'll bring some power badges. We will be able to locate them properly. Then we'll proceed to provide the power required. The Parliament ratified this agreement on July 23, 2015. Now, the interesting development from there was that they were supposed to bring the badges. First, they established a place they could bring the badge to, which was at Abuazi.
And where were they bringing it from?
Italy.
Okay.
Abuazi. It didn't happen because we had difficulties with where they were supposed to locate it. Then, government suggested Pone to them. They went to Pone. Government said they are taking more lands that they were supposed to take, so we disagreed on that too. Then finally, Tama was a third arrangement that they themselves went to look for the Blue Oceans Enclave in the Free Zones Enclave. Then finally, that's where we actually agreed that they were going. But it didn't happen. In 2016, there was a committee formed to look at all our power purchase agreements. In 2017, in fact, two things. Whilst the then government, represented by John Jenapo, says that committee he chaired is different in form and agenda from the committee that recommended the termination. But the ruling of the arbitration court said the committee that was formed in 2016 continued to 2017, but only had some members changed. And instead of John Jenapo, according to the arbitration ruling, it was now chaired by EPA boss, Dr. Henkwa at the time.
Okay.
Now, Dr. Henkwa's committee in April 2017 recommended some action be taken. One, a negotiation for a termination. Then when we terminate at the time, we're supposed to pay within 18 or 19 million US dollars and 25 million US dollars. Yeah, 24.9, 25 approximately. Then government through the AG went ahead. The advice of the AG was that we should terminate.
And this was the first term of President Akufo-Addo?
Yes.
Okay.
So in 2018, we were advised by the Attorney General at the time that we should terminate. And the Attorney General at the time gave some reasons that was later determined by the arbitration court to be at variance with the reasons the EPA had, not EPA, the committee, the PPA committee had set out for the reasons for the negotiation. And again, one of the things you should note about why that became problematic was that, let me state the reasons why the AG submitted. The reasons were that there was illegality for want of capacity of GPDC to enter into the power purchase agreement. One. Two, there was failure to obtain siting and construction permits. The counter argument from the GPDC was that, no, we did go through that process. We actually went to EPA and got some permits. We're still in the process of securing others because of the different changes that we've gone through. And you government asking it to site elsewhere. So that's why we have not finished that process. Installation of used plant contrary to policy. So that's what government, that's the third reason. The final reason why government sought to terminate this agreement was failure on the part of the seller to fulfill its conditions precedent and conditions subsequent. So all these four put together are the reasons why government submitted for its, what they call it, cancellation or if like termination of the agreement. Interestingly, At the time that cabinet had approved the termination, there were still some government officials, including Deputy Minister Oreku Edu, who was then in the Energy Ministry, telling the people that he had the confidence of the president to reinstate the agreement. So when the people were not satisfied with the termination, they opposed it at first. They were not satisfied. They went to court. Another interesting part you should know is that the argument of the then Attorney General was that for these 4 reasons I just said to you, if we are going ahead to terminate the EPA, in fact, it will be entitled, that's Ghana, will be entitled to early termination fee. So instead of we pay money to them,
they would have paid us.
Yes, and this was within 2018. But the GPDC went to court. They went to the arbitration. It's part of the agreement in section 28 of the agreement we signed with them, that they can go to arbitration. When they go, we choose the forum, which is in the UK, based on UK arbitration laws, the international arbitration. And let's also settle this. The arbitration laws are clear. We appointed one person, Professor Abefiajo, as in the panel, the 3-member panel. Then they also appoint another person, that's the GPDC, the company that brought it back. Then the 2 people will appoint somebody to chair, an external person to chair. That was put together nicely. And they came to the conclusion that, 1, the contract itself had problems right from the beginning. 2, the argument of the AG in terminating the contract was not in tune with the premise of the PPA's report.
And the PPA here is
the Power Purchase Agreement Committee we set up to review and advise on what we should do. It states here that it is at variance. The reasons the AG gave for terminating is at variance with that report. Then what he finally did was put together the costs from the beginning to the end and say we are paying the amount of money that you've heard about so far. So in a sum, that's what they say. In fact, they had some tough words for government when it comes to the conduct of the AG. They also had some tough words for how we engage generally and proceeded with. So finally, what he said was that the actual termination was done by the company. We repudiated, and repudiation means you frustrate the performance of a contract. Even though our intention at first was to, what they call it, cancel and negotiate, or terminate and negotiate the way forward. So if you put it all in the sum, that is really what is happening in this.
Raymond, I'll come back to you because we've been picking a lot of reactions on this matter. Let's hear from the Attorney General, Godfred Dame.
It was affected by the then Minister for Energy on the strength of the advice given by the former Attorney General, Madame Gloire-Kufu, in 2018. And Madame Gloire-Kufu also acted on the basis of the report of a committee set up by the SY Minister for Power in September 2016. And that is what I call the PPA committee.
Fair to say then that your government agreed with the NDC position?
Precisely. The government stuck with the report of the PPA committee set up by the NDC itself in 2016, recommending a termination of the agreement because that agreement, if it had been allowed to run, was going to result in excessive power. And I'm saying that excessive power was not only in relation to that agreement, but many other agreements cumulatively was going to result in a loss of about over $7 billion between 2018 and 2013. And then an amount of $586 million each year was also going to be lost. So I think the issue is not as simple as the NDC people would like to make it sound.
Well, we'll pick a reaction also from the NDC, represented by former Deputy Power Minister John Jinapor. But let me come back to you, Raymond. On the Super Morning Show, you had the Attorney General Godfred Dame and John Jinapor, and there was a bit of back and forth, especially with some of the issues that we heard Mr. Godfred Dame raise in the soundbite we just played.
Yes, first issue that was being disputed was whether or not the committee that was set up in 2016 to review power purchase agreements, because we were in an emergency period and we had just exited the emergency period, so we needed to understand what we've done in the period so that we don't continue with doing the bad things if we did any. That committee, was it a continuation of it that recommended the termination in 2017? The argument from the side of John Jinapor is that I chaired the committee, we presented our report. So our job was done by the time we had left office. So there cannot be a thinking that that same committee was the one that recommended it, because I was the chairman of the previous committee.
Okay.
Indeed, when he was asked about, so what did you recommend generally? He said we recommended that there were no, government should not enter into, ECG specifically, should not enter into any further agreement for the purchase of power, and that we had enough, and that we needed the period that we required power. We had enough to deal with that period. Again, then he was asked specifically on this agreement of GPDC, what did you suggest? And he said, we found nothing wrong with it. That was his final agreement, point on that. On the other side, the argument from the Attorney General is that, no, the committee in 2016, its work continued in 2017. And it's the same committee that gave us a recommendation for termination. That is why we proceeded to terminate. Now, two things. On whether or not the committee's work continued from 2016 to 2017, the matter was settled by the arbitration committee. The arbitration committee indeed insisted that it's the same committee that continued into 2017. It makes some concessions that some members of the committee changed. That's one point that it makes there. However, the arbitration point, and this is evident in paragraph 479, it starts by listing in paragraph 478 the reasons for the termination, and proceeded to say that whether or not Dr. Ahenkwah's evidence, and Dr. Ahenkwah is the one who chaired the PPA committee that recommended the termination and negotiation. Now, whether or not Dr. Ahenkwah's evidence to the tribunal was correct, when he testified that none of the information said by the Attorney General to have been elicited on inquiry of the Energy Commission was provided directly by the Commission to the Attorney General. So get it clarified. The man who chaired the committee says none of the things that the Attorney General is saying were directly given to them by us.
Okay, which
because
is
Dr.
the reasons...
also the chair of the Energy Commission.
Which is the reasons the Attorney General gave.
Very good.
Okay.
Yes, he said we didn't provide directly, and proceeded to say that all correspondence have been between the Commission, Energy Commission, and the Ministry of Energy. It is now the tribunal comes to a definition that it is evident on the record available in this arbitration that the Ministry of Energy, that the premises upon which the Attorney General's advice was founded did not reflect the true facts. So what it basically says here that the reasons I stated to you before, the 4 reasons for which we have gone ahead to terminate this particular deal, did not reflect the true facts, which should have informed our decision to terminate the deal. And this is also based on Ahenkwah's evidence that we didn't give the AG the reasons they say they are giving you. Okay. Or the reasons they say they are using for the termination.
All right, Raymond. So right now the big issue is who should be held responsible for causing this financial loss to the state. Government thinks that former NDC ministers and officials should be investigated. But there are those, Raymond, who also believe it shouldn't end there. Yeah. We should cross over and investigate officials and representatives of the government that facilitated, if I may, the termination of the contract.
This is one of the arguments coming from the likes of Benjamin Boachu of ASEP. And it's also because the thinking was that a more holistic approach will be a better one. Holistic approach from those who entered into the contract. Did they do it in good faith? Did they have all the information? Was it a contract done to the interest of this country? More or less, you look at this like a relationship between an agent and the principal. Where the people of this country being the principal and its government officials being the agents, they're entitled, they're actually mandated to act in the best interest of the principal. That's the people of this country. The people who entered into the contract do that. Fast forward to the time that we had to terminate the agreement. Mindful of all we know so far, mindful of what the arbitration committee is saying about the reasons for which we terminated the contract, did the officials at the time in the AG's department give the right advice? Did they properly advise the people of this republic on the implications of terminating the contract? Would it have been cheaper to do so? So the argument was that if you are really going to do any proper investigation, it should start from those who terminated, through to those who went into the contract, through to those who terminated. But the AG's direct response was that, well, I will do a holistic one, but it is my personal view that the AG at the time did nothing wrong. Okay. Of course, he was deputy. Gloria Akufu was the substantive Attorney General. So he insists that the AG at the time did nothing wrong.
Okay, and we know that the court didn't have kind words for government.
That's true, on that particular basis.
On this particular matter. But former Deputy Power Minister John Jinapor has, however, charged the Attorney General to broaden the investigation by looking into government's decision to cancel the contract. And you can get more on that when you get onto Joy FM's page on Facebook. He spoke on the Super Morning Show. Thank you so much, Raymond Akwa. He's head of the Joy Research Desk.